All right, so the two main things that you need to pay attention to for this first assignment, the personal narrative, are your vivid details and your story structure. After 11 years of teaching this assignment, those are the two things that I've come up with are the most important for making sure that you have a good, clear, cohesive story. So those are the two things that we're going to pay attention to the most. So let's start with vivid details. When I say vivid detail, what I'm talking about is any time that you give a specific name or number or adjective to one of the nouns in your story, right? So the difference between my house and my house up on the hill, or the blue house with the red door, right? If you give extra adjectives or specific names, so right, the difference between a gun and a Glock 45, right? Adding those extra names or details makes something a vivid detail rather than just a noun in your story, right? So I'm going to give you an example right now of how that changes. Okay, so we're talking about like the difference between my car, which is just a vague noun, and then something else. So if we type in, let me just show you. If I type in car into Google Images, there's like sports cars, just icons of cars, kind of newer cars, regular looking cars. So if I say car, if I'm telling a story and it involves me going somewhere in a car, and I use the word car, then this is the kind of thing people will see. Regular cars, sports cars, police cars, race cars, anything like that, right? But if in my story I write instead a red 2005 Honda Civic Coupe EX or something like that, that's a vivid detail, right? So look, now that's the only thing that people can picture. There's only one thing. And so when you say red 2005 Honda Civic Coupe EX, there's only one thing we can picture, and so therefore we as the readers, we think this is important. I need to pay attention to this. If you just say car, then there's so much like fuzz around it, haze around it, that I don't know what to picture, and so I don't think it's important. So adding vivid details, specific names and things like that helps the reader know this is important. All right, so when you do that different detail, so the difference between a car and a 2005 Honda Civic Coupe EX, what you're doing is you're telling your audience that this is important. But the thing is, it's like you have to do it at the right time. When I say I want vivid details in a story, I don't mean every noun you give should have extra names or adjectives or numbers attached to them, right? Because what that does is it shows the audience this is important, pay attention to this. So you can't end up overusing it. So watch this scene that I just shot now to think about how this works in terms of like movies you've watched and stuff. And we'll see what a vivid detail looks like in terms of visual details. What's the news? There's a dinosaur wandering around Main Street eating people. We'll go get him. Let's get them. That's good enough. Okay, so in that scene, we see pay attention to the keys and the knife a lot, right? First thing we see that's like a vivid noun is this knife that gets open and you see it and then it gets closed. And then the keys jingling coming up the stairs. But then ultimately the scene is about killing dinosaurs on Main Street, right? And so that knife then just kind of disappears and has nothing to do with the story. So you're left wondering like, well, what was the knife, or where does that have to do with anything, right? So the same thing happens in our writing when we overuse vivid details. This is what a lot of students end up doing is they start their story by saying like, I woke up and my alarm clock, it was 5:35 and I put on my Hurley t-shirt and my this cap, some brand name cap, and tied my Vans shoes, right? So they start overloading us with vivid details, but then the story ends up being about like they had a fight with their mom or something like that. And so we don't want too many vivid details, otherwise, just like in that scene that we saw, we feel misled as the readers, right? So the details that we include need to point toward the story structure, right? So how do we know what is important? Well, we got to worry about the story structure. So I changed venue, but here we are. We're going to talk about story structure. So there's like 1,000 different ways to talk about the structure of a story, or how to talk about it, or ways to break it down into different components and stuff. They talk about different acts in a play or of a movie and stuff like that. But I just want to concentrate on 3 parts of a story, because I think talking about them this way is going to help us the most to concentrate on the vivid details and where to put them and how to use them and stuff like that. Okay, so the 3 main structural parts of a story are the setting or background, the vivid moment, and then catching us up to today, or the moral of the story. So let's take these one by one. So setting or background. This is the part where you kind of lay the foundation for the story. The details in this section aren't as vivid. Each detail you do give, though, needs to be crucial for understanding whatever happens later. This is where you tell us where you were from and things, or how things typically are. So within that, the kind of verbs we use in this section are what's called past continuous. So we use verbs like I used to, or my family, we would always do this, or every day my mom would do these things. So what you're doing is you're talking about a long expanse of time in the past and just kind of describing it generally, right? That's what this section does. Like I say, it lays the background or the setting for then the second part, the vivid moment to happen. Okay? It's usually not very long, typically about 1/3 of your story, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And then one other thing about this section is you can jump around in time. So what you can do is say, well, 10 years ago, my family was like this. Then 5 years ago, we started to do this. A year ago, we moved. Okay, so that like sets the stage, but that's all like pre-work that you're doing to get to the point, the second point, which is the vivid moment. The vivid moment is now like the meat of your story. This is where you actually tell your story. So you've set the background, you've set the setting, and now you actually tell your story, right? So this is almost always marked at the beginning by naming a specific moment in time, right? Sometimes it's as easy as saying, one day, right? My mom would always, come home and she'd make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every single day. One day I came home, and right, you can feel that shift and like, okay, we're not talking about the background or setting anymore. Now we're in the story. We're in this vivid moment, right? Or on Christmas Day in 2003, right? It'll always be marked by some specific time. Okay. Now this it marks the place where vivid details matter the most, right? Because you're going to describe, like we talked about in class, an amount of time that took place over, maybe seconds, right? Or minutes, right? It's not going to be very long. It's going to be one vivid moment that you're going to describe. So an important thing is, once you've locked into this vivid moment, you don't want to skip around anymore. You keep us there until you've told the story, right? So another thing about this is where to have the most fun with language and with vivid details, right? You can lay on the vivid details as long as, again, it's about the main thing that's happening, your main story. In our case, with the personal narrative, the conflict with language that's happening, right? This is where you use metaphors and similes and just kind of lay it on thick and have fun with the language. This is almost always the longest section of the story. Not always, but almost always. Okay, good. So we've set the background and the setting. Now we've told the vivid moment, and we've got the whole arc of like, here's the thing that happened, the moment that happened, how the language messed up, and then how it ended. And then the third section, and this is usually always the very shortest, is, what do I call it? Catching us up to today, or the moral of the story, right? So this is, like I said, the shortest part. Sometimes it's just a sentence or two. It can be longer, but this is also the section with the least amount of detail, usually, because all you're kind of doing is just catching us up today. The main point of this section is to tell us the results or the lasting consequences of the vivid moment of the story, right? So that's how we're going to think about story structure. We're going to think of background or setting, the vivid moment, and then the moral of the story, or catching us up to today. If we keep those in mind, we've kind of got a built-in story structure of like how to set things up,
how to keep us in that lucid, vivid moment of the story, and then tell us the results of what happened, right? So if we can follow that story structure, we're going to end up with something very cohesive and something that makes a lot of sense, that's going to be engaging for your reader and meaningful for them. So now what I want to do is I'm going to watch a video with you of a girl telling a story. This isn't the same thing as her writing an essay, but I'm going to watch it with you, and I'm going to pause to direct your attention to the 3 sections of the story.
My family is originally from Haiti, and I am the youngest out of 3 beautiful daughters. I am also the first to be born in America.
So again, she's in the background and setting of the story. So we've already got really important details about her family, where they're from, where her place is in the family.
Now, growing up in kindergarten, I was the most curious, enthusiastic, energetic kid you could ever meet. And I was always asking questions. And whenever I got the answers to them, I always wanted to share it with somebody, whether it be my friends, my family, especially my mom. However, sometimes that would be a bit of a challenge because me and her had a language barrier between us. Now, of course, she spoke the basics of English, and I spoke basics of Haitian Creole, but there were times where I wouldn't be able to understand her, and she would be asking me to do something for her. I'd be like, what are you saying? I don't understand.
Okay, so what we've got here is some this isn't very vivid yet, right? Some very generic details about things that kind of happened a lot in the past, but these aren't moments. The only thing that she gives us close to vivid detail is where she kind of mimics her own voice saying, okay, I don't get it, or whatever, right? But it's not a vivid moment quite yet. We're still in the background and setting.
And if you have Caribbean parents, you would understand that they get irritated pretty quickly. So that resulted in me getting a butt whooping sometimes. And of course, so that led to my sisters and my dad being the translators for us. Of course, if one wasn't there, then the other one would translate. However, sometimes, my family's very busy. And if nobody was there, then sometimes we would just walk past each other in the hallway like it was a ghost town and not say anything to each other at all.
Okay, so she did use a simile there, that her house was like a ghost town. But still, we're not in a vivid moment yet. We're still just giving general information about how her sisters and her dad had to be the translator between her and her mom. This is still setting the background for what's going on.
And you can imagine how frustrating that is, especially for a kid who's in kindergarten, because I just want to tell my mom everything, like how I learned 2 + 2 is 4 and not 8, and how I mix red and blue, which makes purple, and how I learned how to jump rope, because I'm telling you, I was the worst jump roper known to mankind ever. And so that was so important for me.
So that's maybe a vivid detail that isn't super important. The idea of her not being a good jump roper, that distracts us a little bit, so maybe you caught yourself maybe losing attention a little bit, because I thought this was supposed to be about language and being Haitian Creole, and it's okay, so we've lost a little bit, so you got to pay attention to that kind of stuff, right?
But because of the fact that I couldn't properly communicate with her, it was so frustrating. So one day I decided to...
Okay, so that sounds like it's going to be the signal of a vivid moment. One day, but that's not what happens.
To ask my sisters and my dad to teach me Haitian Creole. That didn't last very long.
Also notice how she's jumping around in time. She started in kindergarten. Now we don't really know where she is, but she asked to be taught Haitian Creole, and then that didn't work. So we don't really have a moment yet. We're still in background and setting about what's going on.
I was very curious, and I asked way too many questions, apparently. Like, why is the sky blue? And why do grass grow out the ground and not the walls? And why is my name pronounced Katiana in English, but Katiana in Haitian Creole? And of course, my sister's being busy getting ready for college, and my dad just working a lot. They were like, okay, child, you asking too much. And they didn't completely give up on me. If I had questions, of course, they would answer. But I was basically left on my own. So my mom and my dad, like I said, worked long hours at work. And whenever they came back home, they always needed help around the house. And so me being the youngest, I would have to help them out. However, that was frustrating for me because that interfered with the time of me teaching myself Haitian Creole. So what I would do is I would lock myself in the bathroom, pretend like I had a stomach virus or something, and just keep practicing. But they just kept calling me, so it didn't really work out all the time.
Okay, notice that past continuous verb that she's using. I would lock myself in the bathroom, right? So this is something that happened in the past many, many times, repeating over. We're still not in that vivid moment yet. This is still background and setting. She's still setting up for the vivid moment of the story.
So, fast forwarding to January 1st. It is also known as Haitian Independence Day.
Okay, did you hear that? That's it. That's the signal. We are in a vivid moment. She gives us a specific day. January 1st, Haitian Independence Day, I think it was.
And it is tradition to drink soup jumu, pumpkin soup. Now, me being the picky little American that I was like, ew, I don't want to eat that. Like, that looks nasty, yellow and thick. Like, get out of here.
Okay, see, so we are in vivid details now, right? She's telling us the exact words that she said when her family asked her if she wanted to eat this soup. She said it was thick and nasty, right?
And so I asked my mom to make me something else. However, my siblings always made in front of me. And I'm like, girl, you missing out. Like, this tastes so good. Like, look at all the meat in the soup. Oh, my gosh. I was like, girl, we really try in this house. Like, let's really try this.
So we've got dialogue. We've got these vivid ideas about what exactly they're saying to each other. So you can feel that this is fun now. This is the story happening. This is the meat of the story, or the soup of the story, I guess.
When I had the soup for the first time, I was like, girl, where you been all my life? It tastes so good. And I remember us sitting at the table, and it was set up as if we were like a mafia mob family. You know, like my dad sitting on one side, the devious kid sitting in the middle, and the wife sitting at the other end.
See, that is a great detail, right? Setting up what's happening at this dinner table, right? With where people are sitting. Because she wants us to picture it in our mind so we can understand what this important event that's going to happen. We're building up to it.
I remember sometime during dinner, my mom asked me in Haitian Creole, "Est-ce que manger bon? Is the food good?" And for me, in that specific moment, everything kind of stopped because I was like, I understood what she just said. Like, I really understood what she just said. And me not realizing that I was kind of taking quite a while to respond back to her. My sisters were getting ready to say, okay, so she said. I was like, no, it's okay, I got it. Like, I know what she said. And so I gathered up all that I was learning and teaching myself in the little bathroom. And I said, oui, manger bon. Yes, the food is good.
Okay, see that? Everything that we've heard up to that point was building up to that moment. That's our moment. That's that vivid moment. Everything else in her story pointed directly to this moment where she finally speaks Haitian Creole to her mother for the first time, right? That's the moment that matters. Everything points to that moment.
And the table kind of got quiet, like everybody's surprised. And, you know, my mom's eyes were bulging out of her head, ready to pop out, but they're not going to fall out yet. Because she's really surprised that I really responded to her. Of course, I have a lisp, and when I was younger, it was really, really bad, so I kind of mispronounced a couple of words. But she still understood what I said. You know, at that time, you expect your family to support you. But, you know, no, my sisters being the sisters that they were, they said, oh, the fake Haitian know how to speak Creole, oh. And so that, like, tore down my little confidence as a kid. And however...
Okay, cool. So that's it. That's the moment, right? She has this moment where she speaks Haitian Creole to her mother. She understands what's said to her, and she says it. And it's this meaningful moment for her family, right? And so then her sisters make fun of her, and there's kind of some fallout from there. Now we're in that third section, right? Now she's going to catch us up to today and tell us what is the result of this moment that happened.
That moment was very inspirational for me because that gave me a piece of hope, and also that showed me that I just broke down a piece of the language barrier that's stopping me and my mom from having a closer relationship. And now that's showing me that I can now take it a step further and continue to teach myself and completely tear it down. So now fast forwarding to today, I'm proud to say that I can speak fluent Haitian Creole, and my mom can speak fluent English, and the language barrier no longer exists between us, and we are as close could ever be as a mother and daughter should. Thank you.
See, so there you go. So that catches us up. She even says the words fast forward to today. She's catching us up. Where is she at? Now she speaks fluent Haitian Creole. Her mother speaks fluent English, right? That moment, that tiny, tiny little moment where she could tell her mother that the soup was good, that's like the crux. That's the thing. Everything built up to it, and everything that she said after that is a result of it. Okay? Good. So hopefully that helps with story structure and wrapping your mind around what you're supposed to do. Good luck. We'll see you in class.